From the national newsroom of the Canadian Press, I'm John Kennedy. For the first time in 6 decades, California's National Guard has been activated and deployed to downtown Los Angeles without a request from its governor. U.S. President Donald Trump is trying to stop protests against immigration enforcement teams, describing the demonstrations as a form of rebellion. Some of the troops are stationed outside the Metropolitan Detention Center dressed in tactical gear and holding long guns while posturing next to armored vehicles. Immigration authorities have been out in the city arresting and preparing people for deportation. Unifor says DHL Express Canada locked out workers just after midnight today after the two sides failed to reach a contract deal. The move injects more labor turmoil into the country's parcel delivery market, and Canadian Press reporter Lisa Laporte has details.
The union says the company locked them out just after midnight after the two sides failed to reach a contract deal. Unifor represents 2,100 truck drivers, couriers, and warehouse workers across 7 provinces.
The company's work stoppage comes as Canada Post remains at odds with 55,000 workers whose union imposed an overtime ban last month, scaling back on parcel services. Environment Canada is reporting air quality has improved across most of Quebec and Ontario thanks to a change in the winds. The federal department lifted air quality alerts for most parts of both provinces after 2 hazy days of wildfire smoke coating the region. Special air quality statements do, however, remain in place for some areas, including communities east of Montreal, south of Quebec City, and in parts of northern Ontario. Continuing on with Northern Ontario, Prime Minister Mark Carney says Ottawa has accepted Ontario's urgent request for wildfire assistance in and around the Sandy Lake First Nation in the province's northwest. That's where the Ontario government says Red Lake 12 wildfire is burning out of control. It's more than 1,500 square kilometers in size and is threatening Sandy Lake First Nation. Carney says the military will help with emergency airlift evacuations, as Ottawa is prepared to mobilize every resource needed to keep Canadians safe. Markets were up at closing time last week thanks to a better-than-expected report on the U.S. job market. Reporter Brian Clark says investors are now waiting for another key report that's scheduled to come down midweek.
Looking ahead this week, all eyes will be on Wednesday's Consumer Price Index, which could give analysts some insight into the impact of those tariffs imposed by the Trump administration earlier this year. This will also provide one of the last big data pieces before the Federal Reserve's June meeting that will decide if interest rates will be cut or hold steady through the summer.
U.S. Central Bank says it kept its key short-term interest rate unchanged this year after cutting it 3 times last year. The Fed meets June 17th and 18th for another decision. This is the Canadian Press. In sports, a successful title defense for Carlos Alcaraz at the French Open. He beat Jannik Sinner in a 5-set thriller that lasted over 5 hours. Alcaraz saved 3 match points before coming back to win. The loss ends Sinner's 20-match winning streak in Grand Slam events. The Stanley Cup Final will see home ice advantage flip. The Florida Panthers are back home for Game 3 tomorrow night after splitting the first 2 games in Edmonton. The series is a rematch of last year's final. Florida had home ice last spring and won the deciding Game 7 at home. Sam Burns is in the clubhouse at 18 under par, 262 at the RBC Canadian Open in Caledon, Ontario. Several players are still on the back 9. Burns shot 8 under 62. Matteo Manassero, Cameron Young, and Matt McCarty are near the top of the leaderboard as the final round of play continues. From the Canadian Press, I'm John Kennedy.